All right, I'm gonna play with this code for a little bit and just see where it goes. The person who submitted it, this is for the final battle. The person who submitted it said they were having trouble trying to figure out, just thinking through like how the objects like are supposed to like play nice with each other. And so I've said this already in the Discord chat, but that's not a C sharp issue. It's a software design issue. It still matters, right? Like you got to be good at the software design part too. But that like learning C sharp is a matter of like learning all the syntax and learning how these things work. And software design is a much more complicated endeavor. It takes a lot longer to get comfortable with it. So like just be patient with it. And just there's not like with the C sharp syntax, it either compiles or it doesn't. That's kind of the end of it. Uh, but with software design, there's a lot more nuance of like, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's that. There's a lot fewer like very definite, hard and firm answers. It's like, well, obviously this is the right thing. There's a lot of options, usually with some trade-offs. Sometimes one is clearly better than another, but a lot of times it isn't that way. So I don't have a lot of time right now to do this, but I did want to do this in the hopes of getting this person unstuck a little bit. Um, I want to say that this is a this is a good starting point. I'm gonna like there's definitely things that could be done about it, maybe things that are a little different. But the first thing I'm going to do, just for the sake of seeing this work, like this person's made two player classes, which is reasonable given where this challenge is going. Like we need the computer, a computer player that picks stuff, randomly, or not even randomly, but like it doesn't rely on the human to decide anything. And then we need the human player that does console input. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in public interface iPlayer just so that this can compile. And then it helps that the signature of these is the same. So like it's already well suited for this. So public, need public on an interface void, pick action, character enemy, and that should be enough to get this to compile. So the next question here is it really came down to the initial question that came up was around like there's let's see if I can find it. He's like get party for so like tell me the um and I'm making little tweaks to this, like adding blank lines and things like that, removing blank lines. I'm I think that a lot of new programmers um, are, and I really wish I would give a lot to see my code from the first few years that I was programming because I'm confident I made all these mistakes and then a lot more. And mistake is maybe too strong of a word, but um, just stuff like I don't know if you like all these like here's a blank line. Well, I don't. I'm gonna just change that. I don't want that way. There's a lot like this is pretty dense. I'm gonna add a blank line here. Like between like logical chunks, I'm adding in blank lines and removing blank lines in other places. Like I don't need two blank lines here. It's a minor thing. And anyway, but I do think that there's a lot to be said about sort of that consistency or self consistency, like with across the code. You want you want to like be intentional about when you do these things, and it's really easy as a new programmer to you've got a lot going through your brain about like what could be done and what should be done, and paying attention to things like indentation, blank lines, good variable names, that kind of stuff. Definitely, like it's a lot, but I think that this is one of those things that should be on your radar of I want to focus on this. I want to make sure that I'm thinking about it because it helps the code be more readable, which is important because especially as programs get bigger, like this is not like this is 220 lines so far. It'll get bigger, um, but it's this will get bigger than it is, and and the bigger it gets, the more time you spend reworking or adjusting, tweaking existing code, and the less time you spend adding new code that is um, completely new. So making your code readable is doing your future self a favor. And for me, that's in air quotes, correct use of white space is a big part of that. And so I'm just like tweaking some of these things. You don't need to, and I do agree that this is not the most important thing right now, so I should stop. But anyway, okay. But yeah, it's one of those things where you should, like, it's useful to sit down and say, like, here's what I want my code to look like. Like, here's the rules I'm going to follow for variable names. Here's the rules I'm going to follow for white space. And there's a bunch of things like, and here the rules that I want to follow for curly braces. Like, some people prefer this. That's not very conventional in C#, but some people coming from other languages prefer that. Even stuff like there was this, where some people are like, I'm always going to put curly braces in. Okay, like make that decision, and or you can say, look, I'm making an intentional choice that I can do any curly brace style that I feel like makes sense. There's not a hard rule. That's allowed too, but now you're making this like intentional. I think that's important. All right, so the thing that I was going to say here is this, like these methods, which are so the book kind of calls these out as, you could do this. This could be a useful tool. A lot of people, I think, then take that as, I'm somehow supposed to add this, and I don't know what that means. Like, should I do that anyway? You don't need to do this. But it might be helpful. Like, for me and my code, it was helpful in the context down here of I'm implementing a player, like right in here. I need to, like, somehow I need to know what my options are. Like, I want to do an attack. Like, this is like character dot action. So this is like this. Let's see, where are the actual, not, must be down lower. Like, this skeleton action is bone crunch. Like, he has his attack. That's how he's getting that. Same with the true programmer, it's got punch. The uncoded one is here. So like they've got their attack there, which I think is a really good start. But so here's the thing, is with this computer player, like theoretically it's like, is there ever, let me check the, yeah, so the way this is set up, like the heroes have this, and like, so when you are controlling the true programmer and it's this, you need to decide like which of these several characters do I want to attack. And it like, which should I attack is like, that could be as simple as, we're just going to always attack the first one in the list. That's a reasonable approach. But okay, that's interesting. I think like this is, anyway, I'm trying to, okay, anyway, I'm just talking through stuff. I think there's a lot of things that could be done here. Ultimately, like with this, like I said, I think that, like, that it's that question of like, somehow it would be nice to know when I'm down in here picking an enemy, it would be nice to know what my options are, whether it's the computer player, which might want to like randomize it, or might want to like always pick the first one, or might want to like, if it thinks it can go for a kill and finish something off, like it might want to prefer that, like whatever that logic is, which could just be a bunch of if statements, right? Like if this, like whatever that is, you don't like AI doesn't have to be like a large language model kind of thing. It can be just a bunch of if statements. That is legitimately AI. It's a different style of AI, but it's like that especially in terms of like game AI. That's a totally legitimate thing. Just a bunch of if statements. If it's this, then do this. If it's this, then do this. Anyway, so ultimately what's happening here is this pick action. Like, I like the starting point. There's two things that I think are you're going to find limiting with this particular setup, and it comes down to the fact that the we are already being given exactly one character, right? Like, we're already being told what that should be. And so if I come over here, like I said, this is in here. Where did that go? Current player pick action. We're already being like kind of force fed. It's going, whatever you're going to do is going to affect this guy. And what I think makes sense is, what if we just pass in the entire enemy party, and then we come down here and make this a list of character enemies, and same here. So list of character enemies, and the same thing here, list of character enemies. And so now we have options. So we've given ourselves the wiggle room to like use multiple, and like what we can do here is just pick the first one, right? So this is the smallest change that moves us forward. I think that like that's a good step. That's a good step in the right direction. So now theoretically we've given things the ability to decide that stuff, and in this context where we've just handed off the list of enemies, it probably matters less to have these methods up here that we're get enemy party for, because the intent of this was given the character that the player is supposed to be choosing an action for, how do I know what my targets are? Well, if I'm doing an attack, the targets are all characters. The possibilities are all characters that are from the opposing party. So this logic right here is already doing that, and so theoretically, like we actually don't necessarily even need these. So I'm actually think I'm going to delete them for now. But the one thing I want to say is, this line of code here is probably not doing what you think it is doing. And I think, so first of all, I think what you would really want is, if character is the true programmer, so you do a type check rather than like this instance check. And the reason for that is the default implementation of double equals for classes is, are they the exact same instance? And given that we are creating a new instance right here, it's not gonna be the same thing. So unless character has overridden equality, which I don't think it has, which you can do, you can override the double equals operator. We haven't. Unless you've done that, then it wouldn't do that. So you'd have to like override that for the true programmer to say all true programmers are equal. I think this is better. I think this is really what you're going for. So I think this is a step in the right direction. But what I actually think you'd want to do is something, because I think what you want is to be able to ask this question for any character. And like, I know this is a little weird, but like conceivably, the true programmer may not be in the hero party or in the monster party. Like, imagine evolving this game in a way where you can like steal somebody from the other team. Like, you can like, I'm trying to think what the word is, but like, there's a skeleton and you like use some effect or whatever that like flips somebody from the opposing team onto your team. So now a skeleton is on your team. In addition, like eventually we're going to have more than one hero, not just the true programmer. So I think I'll tweak this algorithm here, and so we've talked about software design being kind of a next step. This is like algorithms, which is also a next thing. This isn't about C# itself, but like these complexities. Like what we could do is do something like this: if hero party dot contains character, return monster party A, else return hero party. So this is basically find my party, right? So if, and in this case we can just say else return monster party A. I think that change is a lot more resilient to how we might end up using it. Like I think this correctly answers the question in a much broader set of cases. And I think we just do the same thing here. Return monster party A, else return hero party, like that. So we just check and say like, if it's in there, then we return it and we're good. Like I said, I actually like these are. Oh, I don't know. It's yeah. Like I said, we're not technically using these other than apparently we are. No, this is going to return a list of characters, and when we display that in a console.writeline, it's just going to have, it's just going to say like list. Like it's not going to display. I don't think that's doing what you want. Um, I'm not gonna have time to sort through that, but I'll just mention that I think that maybe what you'd want to do, like we are just using lists, which I think it works just fine right now. But what if we made a new type called public class party, and this happens to have, right? So we just, oops, I actually probably want that to be a property. Something like that. But now theoretically, we can give this a name, and so then we'd promote all of these to be parties, take the characters and stick it in the list of characters, and now in that case you can use party.name, like you could use the name, so we could like switch some of these things like that list of um like the list of characters to a party instead. So I'm not going to deal with that, but that's something to think about. um So okay, let's come back down here. So like I said, at this point now, like we can just always do this, but we could also do something like enemies dot. We like this gives us more room to be smarter. So like random equals new random. So what did I just push? And then do something like character dot if enemies dot count is greater than 0. Use skill on enemies at random dot next enemies dot count, something like that. So like we pick one randomly, or in like the human player we can do something like console dot write line, there are, pick a target, and then do something like for each character, I want to call that character and enemies. Oops. All right, I'm gonna, just for the short term, just gonna call that C. If I were spending more time on this, I might rename that to like current or something like that, so that I can call this character, or maybe I should just call this. Oh, I like that better. Enemy singular. Um, console dot write line enemy dot name. Console dot write line which one do you want to attack? And then like console.read line, convert.to int 32. Like we probably want more smarts on this, but something like this, right? Number. So now we have the okay, yeah. So now you can see like the computer player just picks one randomly, which I'm going to be honest, I actually think that's a terrible strategy. With games like this, a lot of times it is like it's useful to like fire everything at one target because they don't get weaker as they get damaged. So finishing something off is the only time that you help your team out. Right? Like if you can finish it off, then you like that's good just strategy for a game like this. Um, so like this is actually a worse strategy than just always targeting the first one. Um, but so yeah, so if character dot action dot use skill else and here's where we do something like new do nothing dot use skill character enemies. Well, like I said, there's no enemies here, so theoretically, no. Like I don't know what we do. Anyway, but that gives like if there's nothing to do, then we should do nothing. What else are we gonna do? Well, as we progress, like there's other options, like use an item, heal, equip gear. Like there's things that can happen here, and so like as we add more features, the logic here of what makes sense as a AI, like what actions should we choose as the game unfolds. Like the logic here is going to get interesting. Um, if we have a potion, if we do that only if our health is low. Like there's no point consuming a potion if we're at 100% health. But if we're like it's that kind of stuff. It's like we putting the logic in here to like make the AI feel smart enough. This is where that would live. But then like and this I've seen a lot of people's code for this stuff of like this gets complicated too. Like what are the options? Like how do I allow the player to use an item, to equip gear, to like just all these different things. And there's definitely some complexity there. So what I want to say though is you can kind of see how this would unfold. But now that I have a little more context, I have more options. I can do more stuff. Like I said, this is really quick and dirty. It does not handle bad input. It's zero based. Like I'd actually rather do something like, well, one, like except for not one. Like I want to count it and then do one based and handle anyway. So there's a lot of stuff that like could make sense here. I do think that this makes sense to say character dot action dot use skill. Like this is the attack that the thing has, rather than making a new one here. Okay. I'm really just about out of time. How much time have I spent? Let's see. 23 minutes. I'm actually 3 minutes past my upper limit. I'm really bad at that. But the other thing I want to say though is a couple of things. One of them is we've given the player, and again, like it's important to separate the character from the player, and this code achieved that, right? Like even before I touched it, this code achieved that. The character in a lot of ways is like ends up feeling like literally like in D&D, like a figure on the tabletop, and the player is the human that's like moving these pieces around. So it's like D&D, yeah, sure, whatever. That may not be a perfect example, because a lot of times in a D&D game, like you are that one character. So maybe it's more like chess, where it's like these are these little tokens, these little things that you're controlling, than it is like D&D. But the idea is like you get for every one of these things, you get to pick what they're doing. But this human player might be responsible for deciding for one character or 50 characters. You could build a version of this where there's 50 heroes and 200 skeletons fighting a skeleton army, and you go through and pick the thing for all of it. So this pick action, the more context we give it, the more room it'll have to do things that we haven't thought of yet. And so right now, we started off with just a single enemy. Now that we've kind of broadened what information the player has to a list of characters that are the enemies, we have a lot more um, wiggle room to do more interesting things, like do this kind of stuff. And uh, I think, like, what if we gave it even more access to stuff? Like, what if we gave it? What do we have? The battle? I don't. Hang on. I don't know what. Yeah, battle. Like the so if I come back down here, if we passed in battle, then theoretically we have access to everything about the battle, including the enemies. Right. So um, now we've got this. So we theoretically have all the context, but now at this point, battle dot get enemy party for character list of character enemies equals that. So now we've got things compiling again. And we can do the same thing down here. Oops, not like that though. Like that. But now again, like theoretically, we have all the context to do whatever else is in there, like battle dot, like what else can we see in here? So like depending on what we're doing, um, this gives us a lot more context. This battle doesn't have much by way of like public API. But like I'm trying to think what else would make sense in here. Oh, we'll pass this in. Anyway, like this gives you more like whatever we need to get in here, we can get in here. Like from given the kind of the main object of battle, we have the full context. So if for example you wanted to, not that you would, but if you wanted to do something like public enum, um, like you could do something like this and then do something like public environment. Right. So like now our battle has an environment. But now we have the ability down in here to do something like if battle.environment is, if it's a desert, then do something. And if it's something else, do something else. So depending on, like maybe you have the ability to, I don't know what it would be, but the ability to do something else if depending on the environment. Like what, but essentially all the relevant context will be either in battle or in something that battle owns. Like it'll be like we already have here, that it has access to the players, it has access to the characters, and anything else is theoretically here. So like if we made that party class, you'd be able to do something like you'd be able to dig into that. And we don't have to make all these public. I don't think we'd want to make all these public, but the idea is basically everything that matters in terms of making a decision about what action to take is going to be accessible through the battle. So if we just switch that over to being a battle now, then we don't have to change it in the future. So it gives us access to everything, and that is useful, I think. In my code, I returned the actions. Like I just said, I action here, and then instead of this right here, where we're saying where we are actually causing the action to run, I returned it. And part of the reason for that is I actually kind of don't want the players themselves to invoke it, partly because it leads to the possibility that someone will do something like, I'm just going to write a new player dot use skill character enemy 0 enemies 1. Like, I'll just apply it to all the enemies, right? Like, it leaves open this, like, it's not, I mean, not that the alternative saves you, but it makes it easier to do the right, it makes it easier to know what the right thing is and harder to do the wrong thing. And making the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard is valuable. That's actually a really big part of software design. So if we could return the actions instead of immediately running them, we end up in a we end up in a better situation. The catch here is this: to do, it might be a reason not to do it. It might be a reason to leave this alone for now. But the benefit of that, yeah. So the nice thing about that right now is, like, theoretically, if we did that, we could come up here. Let's see, where is it? Pick action. So we'd end up with something like this: I action equals, and then we would do action dot use skill character, right? And so here's where we'd have to make some other changes. Is ultimately, in order to do that, we don't know what the target is here, right? So in my version of this, what I did is I just went to something like skills, and what I did would be kind of something like this. I'd squeeze this class in here. Public attack is a skills. I would actually maybe call that skill instead of skills, just because it represents one, not many. And then public character, I can spell it right, character target. I actually, like, my ideal version of this would probably not have a settable thing on here, but if I do that, then it make that abstract. Like, this is one of those things where I think get damage is actually something I would push out of skills and into attack. Okay, I'd actually bump that up to here. And then I don't need that on this do nothing, right? And then in here, so I still need that, but what I'm going to do is make this derived from attack, and same with this, and same with this. So make them all derived from attack. And now all of those pick up this target, and basically I can, when I am making an attack, I can sort of slipstream that in, like it comes in on the side as a part of the actual tag. So, like, what I could do is something like this: I action equals character dot action. Sorry, that's not, like, I action. What I'm gonna do this is attack equals. So okay, I don't like that cast. I'm gonna, like, punt on it. Like, right now they all happen to be attacks, so that's safe for the moment. But what I would need to do is target equals, and now do this. So now I pick my target. Oops. And now I say return attack. So now I can delete this stuff down here. And I got to make this implement I action. And then same here, I. The same thing would apply down here that we would say, we would do this. I mean, literally, it's like a lot of this is the same stuff. Well, that, yeah, okay, that I've already got. I don't need the random, but I do need this stuff. Enemies. Number. And so now I don't need this stuff, other than I do think it's fair to say, okay, return attack. Come back to that in a second. So like after we use the skill, then we do like some of this other stuff that was there. Console right line, and there was a thread dot sleep. I'm gonna the one used 500 milliseconds, the other one used 1500 milliseconds. I'm gonna split the difference and say whether the computer or the human are just gonna do the same thing. That's a change in behavior. This use skill at this point, like I said, the do nothing action doesn't strictly need an enemy. So I'm gonna remove that, and then this is gonna be, so skills, I'm gonna remove that. Like this, so interestingly, like this stuff here, I'm gonna move out of here and put in here. Oops, what do I need? Over, public override, void use skill, character. And now this will use the target. So basically I moved this up. So like this text here, it makes sense for the attack. What's that complaining about? Oh, I'm gonna just make this abstract and say, look, you like performing the skill, whatever the skill is. I'm gonna do that. But now right here, override use skill. And now what I'm gonna do is take like, so this stuff here is pretty similar, but instead I'm gonna come in here and say like there's no damage being dealt, there's no target. So now I've created a mechanism that allows me to have an action that in this case it's a skill that doesn't need a target, right? So like this doesn't, the method signature doesn't demand a target. This also actually opens up room for me to have some attacks that target multiple things. Like imagine something where you just deal damage to an entire party, or to like chain lightning that like attacks 3 different things. One guy and the 2 guys next to it, and the 2 guys after it, or I don't know what. Like it gives us room to have some options. So I like that part of it. And I think everything's still compiling here. So I haven't ran it, but it seems we're in pretty good shape. I do think, so there was a couple of things I didn't like about it. One of them was that I kind of like, let's see, where is it? I don't like this part of it where is it? Out of all the stuff that I did, it's this here where like we get this from here and then set the target. Like it leaves open room. Like in my code, I just made a new attack action, and so Like one thing that could work for that is to separate this stuff from like the metadata about it. I, yeah, like or to, yeah, I'm trying to think of like what I feel like would be nice would be to make it so that essentially when you make an attack, um, okay, I'm using primary constructors here, and that's not covered in the book because that's a C# like 13 feature or something. But so I get rid of this setter, public attack character target, initialize it. And then of course you'd have to, like, for every single one of these other attacks, you have to like pass it in. But then, like I said, the catch there is I'm trying to think. Like I said, I've already spent way more time on this than I meant to take. So I really need to just be done. I think that there's something that you could do here where the attack as an action, like wrap up this stuff in like turn this stuff into like bone crunch, like attack data, like the name and the damage, like shift that over so that's all it is it's just like this data about the attack. And then up here, when we pick an attack, you pass in, like if you had public attack, and like maybe the thing to do here is to like make this an attack action, but then to like actually keep a public class, public abstract class attack that has a public string, public abstract string name, and a public int get damage, public abstract. Okay, now make these all do that, which they're doing. What am I? Cannot change. Oh, so these would all become public. I'm I'm in a weird. This isn't necessarily the place to. Okay, so now there's this attack, and make the attack action have a reference to something like that. Oh, attack action. Wow, we're going fast and kind of crazy here. This guy, this could become, like we've called it action, but what I'm gonna do is just let that be null. And then what am I doing? Where are my compiler errors? Yeah, so here when we pick an attack, I don't need to do that cast anymore, but what I do here is now I say return new attack action, and we pass in the target, which we've got right here. Let's see if we can keep this still simple. Character target equals that target, and then the attack, which is character dot action. Okay, doing some crazy stuff here. Return. Oh no, I already got that. Return new attack action. Oh, doesn't need to be abstract anymore. And this, I don't need this anymore. Now what I need is attack dot get damage. What's it complaining about now? No, name. Like I could just call this attack. I actually wonder about just like doing attack dot name. like passing it through to the actual like this that represents like the type of attack, and this is like I want to use this attack on this character. Like it's the concept of apply the attack in a context, that I think gives us some flexibility. It's kind of crazy, but the same thing applies right here for this thing, where we can just do something like this, where we say return new attack action, enemies at index number and character action, which I might actually rename to attack. The other thing I'll say is there's nothing in here that demands that the character only have one available attack. It's possible that a character could have multiple attacks. So in which case we would want to upgrade this to like a list of attacks and then allow the computer player to just pick one. Again, it could be random. It could be pick the first one. It could be do some detailed analysis of what could be useful. Like if the attack deals fire damage and we're in a desert thing and the thing is weak to fire, use that. Like there's some really, like you could write some really complicated logic. For the human player, it's just, hey, look, this character has these 4 attacks they can do. Pick one. These are warning me that it might be null, which is technically true, but I based on the setup, I know like I said, what I can do is remove this, and then those will go away. Instead, they'll say you never had an attack that was doing nothing. Anyway, like one of the bigger design changes here is to separate to say doing nothing is not an attack. It's a totally separate thing. The same with like using potions or like whatever it is. There's a lot of other things that aren't attacks, and we've kind of created that separation here so we can create other types of actions. Okay. I spent too much time, and like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here that you do not need to like go this far or do any of this stuff. Especially this last stuff where I like introduced this I separated an attack from the attack action that isn't necessary. Like what the problem that solved is that I didn't like that I just had a single, say, bone crunch, and that I kept reusing it with but like setting the target like kind of on the fly. Like anytime I went to use it, I had to remember to set that. This version kind of forces that to work correctly. Like you don't change the target over time. It's just when it's created, you do it. So anyway, some different paradigms there, but I do feel like that gives you kind of a reasonable foundation to kind of build on it. And before I walk away from this, I do want to say that, there's a lot of stuff in here. Like I was trying to balance the parts of, I want to give people enough design hints that people who aren't so sure of themselves in terms of design can feel like they aren't just approaching this out of thin air. They feel like they've got something to go on without declaring it must be done in this way. Like I want people to feel like, given the feature set, they can do whatever they want as long as it achieves the end result. And I don't really feel like I nailed that in the final battle. Like there's a lot of stuff that's like, well, you could do this, but it's hard to connect the dots. And it's one of those things that I'm planning on tweaking a little bit for the 6th edition. To make that clearer of like, here's some possibilities. Like here's a skeleton of the program. Like it could look like this, and without making people feel like they've got to follow any particular design guidance. And I think I can make that tie into the story really well. So anyway, I that's a future thing. But don't when you look at it. So when you look at as long as it achieves the stated user visible behavior, not like nothing else matters. As long as it behaves the way the program is describing it should work. Being able to have a battle, like eventually you need to be able to have different character types, which this already has, different types of actions, advancing from one battle to the next, being able to have computer and human players, being able to being like you do need it to support having a human control, like two human players, one human controlling the heroes and one controlling the monsters. That's required. But any other like comments or notes in that description is, if anything that says, you could make this class or that class, you don't need to do any of that. That it's food for thought if it's helpful. If not, skip it. And that applies with everything that I've done here in this as well. I have a tendency to, like, I feel like the design that I came up with when I did this works really, really well. And a lot of people end up similar to it, but a little bit different. I just want to say that it's like I will tend to refactor what other people submit kind of into what I did. So that's kind of what I did here. Like this ends up looking a lot more like what I did. But you don't need to do it that way. There are a lot of other ways you could do it. So, but hopefully this gets you unstuck and moving forward again. I'm planning on putting this on YouTube. I'm going to start by putting it like unlisted, but eventually making it available for others to see. This is a place that a lot of people get stuck at, and they end up in basically a similar situation where they're just not quite sure how to, like, that question of like, well, how do I make those methods work? Like, what are they for? These. Well, like I said, you don't need to do it this way. There's a lot of other ways you could do it. This was useful to me. We ended up, through all of our refactoring, ended up using these. Well, I was going to say, this has 0 references. This has 3. We ended up using this one, not this one. But we might. So a lot of people struggle right here in this spot. And so, yeah, things to think about. It's like, no matter what, whether, this is your code or you're just watching this video, there are a lot of ways that you could do this. There isn't one right way. So do what makes sense for you. Do what works for you. And it's part of the challenge and joy of programming is getting into these things and saying, oh, wait, I need to do that. How on earth? Like the code's not set up to do that. Like at some point it's like, oh, add a new action type. Okay. It's at this point, it's trivial to add in a new action type, add in a new monster type. Okay, that's easy to do too. Like I've already got, like I just make another one of these, right? Like it's easy. So, but then you run into something where it's like, well, now make it so that you can equip gear, and that there are, when you are holding a particular piece of gear, you have a second attack available. Oh, great. How do we make that work? Like that is very, very common in software development, is you have built your system in a particular way, imagining the things that are likely to change. And then all of a sudden you are tasked with, we got to add in this feature. And you sit there saying, I didn't build it that way. So now what? And then you sit here looking at your code, scratching your head, trying to figure out, What is the right way to squeeze that in? How do, like, I mean, that example of like, oh, I might have multiple attacks. I didn't build it that way. This stuff here, pick action. Like I've got, there's one action, which again I might rename to attack, but what do I do? Well, maybe I could do this. But then I gotta like come up here and fix this, and I gotta, like it's complicated. So then you have to just kind of figure out how to evolve the code, and that is not easy, and it is a skill that takes a lot of patience to get good at. It comes in time. You get better at it with time, figuring out how to break down the change into small steps that are reasonable. I mean, like for example, one thing you could, I need to just be done. But like you could do this, and you could say like primary action. Poof. Okay, now I have that, and then I'll say public attack list of attack all attacks. Right. So now I have all the attacks. Theoretically, I haven't broken anything, but now I have a mechanism that allows these things to it allows these things to, you gotta go to wherever the, like I got to do this in all these things, and like you can iterate your way there. I'm gonna stop because I could do this all day, and I don't mean that in a good way. So yeah, I hopefully this like kind of gives you some things to think about in terms of moving forward with it. Not that any of these need to be done. But yeah, just like this is the final battle. It is meant to be hard. I'll admit it's probably a bit harder than I thought it would be, and in future editions, I'm gonna. I don't. The gist is I intend to keep the same. I want to just make it 20% easier, and give some clarity about what's truly required and what are like, hey, here's some possibilities. Partly because this is about the 20th time I've sat down with somebody's final battle code and kind of refactored and reworked stuff to kind of help them through it. Like I've done this a bunch before, and I would like it if in the future the challenge and the stuff that's in there takes care of itself, so that people are able to get through it despite a struggle. Struggling is fine, but when people feel so stuck that they're like, I lost my motivation. I don't even know where to go with this. That I'm trying to avoid. That is not what I'm going for with the book. So hopefully future editions, it'll be a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier. Still hard. I'm not trying to take away the challenge. I'm just trying to take away the more people who end up in a productive struggle rather than people who are in an unproductive struggle. All right, I'm going to stop here, but hopefully that's helpful to the person who submitted this code, and maybe also to people who are just also in a similar situation and struggling. But thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys in another video later.